Somebody once said, all good things must come to an end. This is our last chapter dealing with output. Let's talk about this photo right here. It is 649_3328310 JPEG. Another one of our great images from PhotoSpin. What I want to do with this image is I want to save it. Let's talk about some of the formats that we have in Adobe Photoshop. Actually, we could spend the next 3.5 days here. But let's look at some of the formats and why you might want to choose one of them over another. If we go up to the word File, I'm not going to select Save because that will just do it over again. It's grayed out anyway because I haven't changed anything. Let's go ahead and go to Save As. Now in Save As, number one, you can change the name, obviously. We won't. You can tell it where it's supposed to go. I will say one thing, though, about those two options. How many out there could raise their hand and say, Andy, I know somewhere on my hard drive is an image. I know I saved it months ago. I can't find it. Think of your hard drive like a big file cabinet. You know this. Give it a name that does make sense and put it somewhere where it makes sense. Now, the formats are what we want to talk about. This is what it was, so that's what it gives us. We'll talk about JPEG later. But you have a lot of different formats. A couple of them. Number one, of course, Photoshop. If you choose the PSD format, you are choosing a format that will allow you to save every single thing that you did in Adobe Photoshop to that image. Layers and styles and anything. And the good news is that anything in the Adobe family, like InDesign or Adobe Illustrator, they'll all take this image. That is my go-to format for just about everything I do if it's in the Adobe family, the PSD format, because I don't lose a thing when I use it. Now, you do have some options. Some are grayed out because we don't have these things, but you could say, well, no, just save it as a copy for me. Or if you have any alpha channels, maybe some additional layers, notes, spot colors, those would be available. In other words, you can say, no, I want them, or yes, I want them in the document. If you have multiple layers and you don't turn this one on, it will be on by default. It will flatten the image when it saves it, and that's usually not what you want to do. In here, we can embed the color profile. We're not using a proof setup, but we can embed the color profile RGB because we're in that color space if you want to. If you don't, it goes out without an embedded color profile. We'll talk about profiles later and why you might or might not want to use that one. So that's the PSD. If we come in here, you have another one called the large document format. Let me just mention something about that. It's for documents that are over in width and height, something like 300,000 plus pixels. It's for huge images. If you need to save an image that's absolutely humongous, that's the option to choose. Down here, we'll skip a lot of these, is Photoshop EPS for encapsulated PostScript. Now, I like that. One of the things about an EPS file is it allows you to save the best of both worlds. It allows you to save vector stuff and at the same time save photographic stuff. So the EPS format's a good one to use. A lot of press operators actually like that one. If we come down here, you have this one called JPEG Stereo and Multi-Picture Format. What are those? Well, they're relatively new. They allow you, if you want to do this, maybe we should do a whole lesson or a whole chapter on this someday, is making three-dimensional images, stereoscopic images, where you have the two images where you look at them through the viewer. That's what that is. JPEG Stereo and Multi-Picture Format. Now, moving down a little bit more, you have Photoshop DCS 1 and 2. Let me just mention those. They stand for Digital Color Separation. If you're saving a CMYK file for press and you use one of these options, it will actually save 5 separate files. A cyan, a magenta, a yellow, and a black plate, and a composite with all of them. The DCS1 is for older presses, and the DCS2 is for newer presses and digital presses. Now let me go back to this one, TIFF. Let me select that one. And let's pretend like we're going to save this one, so I'm going to click Save. TIFF is a very universal format. It allows you to save images that can be used and opened in almost anything. The latest version of TIFF saves practically everything a PSD will, but it will open in some devices that won't allow the PSD format. Now you have compression settings. LZW and ZIP are lossless compression. They are going to make the file smaller on your hard drive, and when it opens, there is no loss of information. However, the one thing to remember about any compression format, do the people on the other side have the ability to uncompress it? If they do, that's fine. This one, JPEG, is loss E and is not supported by things like older TIFF readers. It'll give you a warning here if you use it. But what JPEG does basically is it compresses the image by removing color information in a permanent way. So remember that about JPEG. I usually, unless I have to, leave it at none. They open faster, they work faster, and I don't know, most of us do have a lot of storage space on our computers today. Pixel order. You've got interleaved, which is pretty standard, and you've got per channel. Now, per channel is actually a faster way to work, but it's not supported by everything. So I would say, unless you really know what you want to do here, leave it at interleaved. Byte order used to be really important. Macintosh and IBM didn't talk to each other as well 20 years ago. Today, I don't see a problem with actually using either one of them, but since there's more IBM stuff out there than Mac, I usually, even though I work on a Macintosh, leave that on IBM PC. You have something called Save Image Pyramid, which allows you to save images in a multi-resolution format. If we had transparency, we'd have the ability to say, I want you to save that. Now, that's an important one to remember. I've had students come to me and say, well, Andy, I've done transparent areas in my image and I saved it as a TIFF, but when I reopened it, those areas were white. Well, you have to check that item. It's not by default. The last is layer compression. We don't have any layers, don't forget, so that's why they're all grayed out. RLE is the best one to use. Faster saves, they're bigger files, but basically it does the job. You can zip it, which is slower saves, or you can say discard the layers and save as a copy. It's up to you. TIFF is probably one of the most universal formats on the planet. Let's go ahead and get out of here. Let me go back up here one more time and mention one more. If we scroll down, you'll see the PNG, Portable Network Graphic. Now, that is something that is used on the internet, but let me give you a clue on PNGs. PNG is really the native format for things like Microsoft products like PowerPoint. If you save your images in the correct resolution, typically about 72, in the size they're supposed to be, and you save them as PNGs and move them into something like a PowerPoint presentation, everybody's going to love what you did. And they're going to look great, and they're going to load fast. Let's go ahead and get out of here. And, of course, if we click Save, we'd save it. Let's go ahead and just click Cancel. There are dozens of formats in this program that you can save in. Remember, what you save it in is based on what you're doing with the image. Begin with the end in mind. Whenever you have an image open and you're working on it, you should begin with what you're going to do with it and then work forward. That's the smartest way to do it. If you are unsure about where it's going, my strong suggestion here would be to save it as a PSD, work it as a PSD. You can always convert it into any other format later. As a matter of fact, while we're on that subject, the PSD format, since it's native to Adobe Photoshop, works faster as you are doing things than any other format. There you go. Different formats for different things.